Casanova's wanton desires had led him to the seduction and spoiling of 2 nuns from the convent on the island of Murano.
You will see that you are in the wrong, dearest, and that far from despising you, my dear friend loves you only.
Casanova retired to MM's room, where MM and Caterina were waiting, the French ambassador to join them later.
Encouraging persons into debauchery.
Of course, they were scared like hell that somebody would follow them and that word would go around. There was a breakout from the prison.
When a woman yields to love, she should not be conquered before she has fought with her own desires. She should not give way to the first impulse of lustful desire and abandon herself to the first man who takes her fancy.
Save me, if it is still possible.
But I should like to punish the audacious author of that notice.
Propriety is often far from proper.
Be gone! I should have become madly in love with you.
Take care. She will do all in her power to entrap you.
I loved her, or was it desire? Love turned to lust.
This accusation is a groundless calumny.
Farewell. Until 3 o'clock.
Tomorrow morning, I shall ask you to come with me before the magistrate.
I could kill myself this instant. I would that she had never known me.
Nevertheless, I'm obliged to you for your frankness and shall be on my guard.
Then you must take care never to see me, or else all your efforts will be in vain.
And who, pray tell, shall be joining us?
Well, you're going to like this. La Charpillon and her aunt.
Really? I once took a violent fancy for the little hussy. It was one evening when I was at Vauxhall, and I offered her 20 guineas to come with me on a little walk in a dark alley. She said she would if I paid the money in advance, which I was fool enough to do. She went with me, and as soon as we were alone, she ran away. I could not catch her again, though I searched the whole evening through.
You should have boxed her ears before everybody.
No, I should have got into trouble, and people would have laughed at me besides. I preferred to despise her, and the money too. You in love with her?
No, but I am curious, as were you.
Take care. She will do all in her power to entrap you.
I look forward to her trying.
And so, my friend, do I.
Don't be ridiculous.
She came in and went up to my lord with the most perfect coolness and began to chatter away to him without taking any notice of me. She laughed, joked, and reproached him for not having pursued her in Vauxhall. Her stratagem, she said, was only meant to excite him the more.
Another time, I shall not escape you.
Perhaps not, my dear. For another time, I shall be careful not to pay you in advance.
Oh, fie. You degrade yourself by talking about paying.
Oh, I suppose I honor you.
You never talk of such things.
Lord Pembroke laughed at her impertinence while she made a vigorous assault on him, for his coolness and indifference piqued her. She left us soon after dinner, making me promise to dine with her the day after next. On the day appointed, my evil destiny made me go to the Charpillons. The girl introduced me to her mother, whom I had once recollected, although she had aged and altered since I had seen her. In the year 1759, a Genevan named Bellome had persuaded me to sell her jewels to the extent of 6,000 francs, and she had paid me in bills drawn by her and her 2 sisters on this Bellome. But they were then known as Arnsberger. The Genevan became bankrupt before the bills were due, and the 3 sisters disappeared. As may be imagined, I was surprised to find them in England, and especially to be introduced to them by the Charpillon, who, knowing nothing of the affair of the jewels, had not told them that Seincourt was the same as Casanova, whom they had cheated of 6,000 francs.
I am delighted to see you again.
I recollect you, sir. That rogue Bolam.
Please, please, we will discuss that subject another time. I hear you were ill.
I have been at death's door, but I am better now. My daughter did not tell me your proper name.
Yes, she did. My name is Sengal as well as Casanova. I was known by the latter name at Paris when I first made your daughter's acquaintance. Although, I didn't know at the time that she was your daughter.
I was fascinated. I thought I would be on my guard and be safe, and as I only wanted the daughter, I looked on all else as of a little moment. The only thing which annoyed me was that the Charpion, after apologizing for having made me sit down to such a poor dinner, invited herself and all the company to sup with me on any day I like to mention. And at midnight I went away, ill-pleased with myself, but with no purpose of amendment, for this sorceress had got me in her foils. All the same, I had the strength of mind to refrain from seeing her for 2 days. And on the third, which was the day appointed for the cursed supper, she and her aunt paid me a call at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I have come to breakfast with you, and to discuss a certain question.
Will you tell me your business now or after breakfast?
After breakfast, for we must be alone.
We had our breakfast, and then the aunt went into another room, and the Champion, after describing the monetary situation of the family, told me that it would be much relieved if her aunt could obtain 100 guineas.
What would she do with the money?
She would make the balm of life, of which she possesses a secret, and no doubt she would make her fortune too.
She then began to dilate on the marvelous properties of the balm, on its probable success in a town like London, and on the benefits which would accrue to myself, for of course I should share in the profits.
I will give you a decided answer after supper.
I then began to caress her and to make assaults in the style of an amorous man, but it was all in vain. She gave me her hand and said,
Farewell, till this evening.
I saw that I should get nothing out of her without spending 100 guineas, and I determined not to attempt to bargain, but I would let her understand that she must make up her mind not to play prude. The game was in my hands, and all I had to do was to take care not to be duped.
It seems to me you don't seem very anxious to hear my reply.
You have made up your mind, I suppose.
I have. The 100 guineas are at your disposal.
Then please to give the money to my aunt. Otherwise, people might think I got it from you by some improper means.
I will do so.
You will get nothing from me, either by money or violence. But you can hope for all when I find you really nice and quiet.
As documents have to be executed, it might take some time.
Won't you fix the time?
The time depends entirely on you.
When my hateful guests were gone, I began to reflect and came to the conclusion that the young adventuress had determined to plunder me without giving me anything in return. I determined to have nothing more to do with her, but I could not get her beauty out of my mind. In less than 3 weeks, I congratulated myself on having forgotten the Charpion and on having replaced her by innocent amours. Such was my condition when, one morning, the favorite aunt of the Charpion paid me a call and said that they were all mystified at not having seen me since the supper I had given them, especially herself, as her niece had given her to understand that I would furnish her with the means of making the balm of life.
I would have gladly given you your 100 guineas if your niece had treated me as a friend. But she refused me favors a Vestal might have granted, and you must know she is by no means a Vestal.
Don't mind my laughing. My niece is an innocent, giddy girl. She loves you. But she's afraid you have only a passing whim for her. She's in bed now with a bad cold. And if you will come and see her, I'm sure you will be satisfied.
These artful remarks, which had no doubt been prepared in advance, ought to have aroused all my scorn, but instead of that, they awakened the most violent desires. I laughed in chorus with the woman and asked what would be the best time to call.
Come now. Give one knock.
Very good. You may expect me shortly.
I congratulated myself on being on the verge of success. For after the explanation I'd had with the aunt, and having, as I thought, a friend in her, I did not doubt that I should succeed. I put on my greatcoat, and in less than a quarter of an hour, I knocked on their door.
Come back in quarter of an hour. She's been ordered a bath, is just going to take it.
This is another imposture. You're as bad a liar as she is.
You're cruel and unjust. And if you will promise to be discreet, I'll take you up to the 3rd floor where she's bathing.
Very good. Take me.
She went upstairs, I following on tiptoe. She pushed me into a room and shut the door upon me. The Charpion was in a huge bath, with her head towards the door, and the infernal coquette, pretending to think it was her aunt, did not move and said,
Give me the towels, Aunt.
She was in the most seductive posture, and I had the pleasure of gazing on her exquisite proportions.
Be gone!
You needn't exert your voice. I'm not going to be duped.
Be gone!
No. Give me a minute to collect myself.
My aunt shall pay dearly for this.
She will find me her friend. I won't touch you. So show me a little more of your charms.
More of my charms?
Yes. Put yourself as you were when I came in.
Certainly not! Leave the room!
I've told you I'm not going. And that you needn't fear for your virginity, we will say.
She then showed me a picture more seductive than the first, and pretending kindliness said,
Please leave me. I will not fail to show my gratitude.
Seeing that she got nothing, that I refrained from touching her, and that the fire she had kindled was in a fair way to being put out, she turned her back to me to give me to understand that it was no pleasure to her to look at me. However, my passions were running high, and I had to have recourse to self-abuse to calm my senses. I was glad to find myself relieved, as this proved to me that the desire went no deeper than the senses. The aunt came in just as I had finished, and I went out without a word, well pleased to find myself despising a character wherein profit and loss usurped the place of feeling. The aunt came to me as I was going out of the house and inquired if I were satisfied.
2 weeks later, Casanova sent a note to Charpion's mother, offering to pay 100 guineas for the services of her daughter for a single night.
Sir, is it a fact that you told my mother that you would give 100 guineas to spend the night with me?
No, not to spend the night with you, but after I'd passed it. Isn't the price enough?
No jesting, sir, if you please. There's no question of bargaining. All I want to know is whether you think you have a right to insult me, and that I'm going to bear it.
If you think yourself insulted, I may perhaps confess I was wrong, but I did not think I should have to listen to any reproaches from you. I could not address you directly, as I know your arts only too well.
I shall not pay any attention to your abuse of myself. I will only remind you of what I said. That neither money nor violence were of any use, and that your only way was to make me in love with you by gentle means. Show me where I have broken my word. It is you that have forsworn yourself in coming into my bathroom and in sending such a brutal message to my mother.
No, you needn't bother to weep. I knew the source of those tears. It is defiled.
You know nothing of it. I love you, and it is hard to have you treat me so.
You love me? You have not taken the best way to prove it.
As good a way as yours. You have behaved to me as if I were the vilest of prostitutes, and yesterday you seemed to think I was a brute beast, the slave of my mother. You should have written to me in person. And without the intervention of so vile an agent, I should have replied in the same way. And you need not have been afraid that you would be deceived.
Supposing I had written, what would your answer have been?
I should have put all money matters out of question. I should have promised to content you on the condition that you would come and court me for a fortnight without demanding the slightest favor. We should have lived a pleasant life. We should have gone to the theater and to the parks. I should have become madly in love with you. Then I should have given myself up to you for love, and nothing but love. I am ashamed to say that hitherto I have only given myself out of mere complacence. Unhappy woman that I am. But I think nature meant me to love. And I thought when I saw you that my happy star had sent you to England that I might know the bliss of true affection. Instead of this, you have only made me unhappy. You're the first man that has seen me weep. You have troubled my peace at home, for my mother shall never have the sum you promised her, but for nothing but a kiss.
I am sorry to have injured you, though I did not intend to do so. Only I don't know what I can do.
Come and see us, and keep your money, which I despise. If you love me, come and conquer me like a reasonable and not a brutal lover. And that will help you. You cannot doubt that I love you.
All this seemed so natural to me that I never dreamed it contained a trap. I was caught, and I promised to do what she wished, but only for a fortnight. She confirmed her promise, and her countenance became once more serene and calm. The Charpillon was a born actress. She got up to go, and on my begging a kiss as a pledge of our reconciliation, she replied with a smile, the charm of which she well knew, that it would not do to begin by breaking the terms of our agreement. And she left me more in love than ever, and full of repentance for my conduct.
That very evening I began my visits, and judged from my welcome that my triumph was nigh at hand. But love fills our minds with idle visions and draws a veil over the truth. The fortnight went by without my even kissing her hand. And every time I came, I brought some expensive gift which seemed cheap to me when I obtained such smiles of gratitude in exchange. Besides these presents, not a day passed without some excursion to the country or party at the theater. That fortnight cost me 400 guineas, at least.
Please excuse me if this question is rather pertinent, but will Charpillon be spending the night with me here or at my house?
We will settle this matter after supper, if that is an agreement with you.
I made no objection, not liking to tell her that in my house the supper would be more succulent and a better prelude for the kind of exercise I expected to enjoy. When we had supped, the mother took me aside and asked me to leave with the company and then to come back. I obeyed, laughing to myself at this foolish mystery, and when I came back I found the mother and the daughter in the parlor, in which a bed had been laid on the floor. Though I did not much care for this arrangement, I was too amorous to raise any objection at a moment when I thought my triumph was at hand. But I was astonished when the mother asked me if I would like to pay the 100 guineas in advance.
Oh, fie!
Exclaimed the girl, and her mother left the room. My amorous feelings, so long pent up within my breast, would soon find relief.
Wait for me in bed.
She put out the candles. I complained of this act of hers, but she said she could not sleep with the light shining on her. I began to suspect that I might have some difficulties thrown in my way to sharpen the pleasure, but I determined to be resigned and to overcome them all.
When I felt her in bed, I tried to clasp her in my arms, but found that she had wrapped herself up in a long nightgown. Her arms were crossed and her head buried in her chest. I entreated, scolded, cursed, but all in vain. She let me go on and answered not a word. At first I thought it was a joke, but I soon found out my mistake. The veil fell from my eyes, and I saw myself in my true colors, the degraded dupe of a vile prostitute. I was utterly depressed. She was so irritable with me, but I decided that I wanted to give up the girl, demanding my money back. But I could not sleep. I loved her. Or was it desire? Love turned to lust. I wanted to kill myself. I had a plan to put balls of lead in my coat pockets and throw myself off a bridge.
It is from this point that Casanova dates the decline of his life. There were among the papers at Dux 2 letters from Marianne de Charpillon and a manuscript outlining the story of Casanova's relationships with her and her family.
I know not, monsieur, whether you forgot the engagement Saturday last. As for me, I remember that you consented to give us the pleasure of having you at dinner today, Monday, the 12th of the month. I would greatly like to know whether your ill humour has left you. This would please me. Farewell, in awaiting the honour of seeing you. Marianne de Charpillon. Monsieur, as I have a part in all which concerns you, I am greatly put out to know of the new illness which incommodes you. I hope that this will be so trifling that we will have the pleasure of seeing you well and at our house today or tomorrow. And in truth, the gift which you sent me is so pretty that I know not how to express to you the pleasure it has given me and how much I value it. And I cannot see why you must always provoke me by telling me that it is my fault that you are filled with bile, while I am as innocent as a newborn babe, and would wish you so gentle and patient that your blood would become a true clarified syrup. This will come to you if you follow my advice. I am, monsieur, your very humble servant, Marianne de Charpillon.
Driving home in his carriage, just as he entered Pall Mall, a voice was heard crying, "Good night," sang out. Casanova put his head out of the window to reply, and was horrified to see in an instant that the carriage was surrounded by men armed with pistols. Asking what they wanted, he was told that they were to take him to Newgate, and that he would hear of what his crime was when he arrived in prison. After much arguing, the head constable relinquished and agreed to take Casanova to a house and place him under house arrest.
We stopped before the house, and I was placed in a large room on the ground floor, furnished solely with benches and long tables. My servant sent back the carriage and came to keep me company. The 6 constables said that he could not leave and told me that I should send out for some meat and drink for them. I told my servant to give them what they wanted and to be as amicable with them as possible.
You were very generous to your keepers.
Indeed. I had not committed a crime. I was quite at ease. I knew that my arrest must be the effect of a slander. And as I was aware that London justice was speedy and equitable, I thought I should soon be free.
A long and tedious night.
I amused myself by reflecting on my rapid passage from a numerous and exalted position to the vile place I now occupied, though I was still dressed like a prince. At last the day dawned, and the keeper of the tavern came to see who the prisoner was. I could not help but laugh, for when he saw me, he began to curse the constables for not waking him when I came. He had lost the guinea I should have paid for a private room. At last news was brought that the magistrate was sitting, and I must be brought up.
Still in your finery?
Exactly. A coach was summoned, and I got into it. For if I had dared to walk along the streets in my magnificent attire, the mob would have pelted me. I went into the halls of justice, and all the eyes were at once attracted to me. My silks and my satins appeared to them as the height of impertinence.
At the end of the room, I saw a gentleman sitting in an armchair and concluded him to be my judge. I was right, and the judge was blind. He He wore a broad band around his head, passing over his eyes.
Signor Casanova, be kind enough to step forward. I wish to speak with you.
Eccomi, signore.
Signor de Casanova of Venice, you are condemned to perpetual confinement in the prisons of His Majesty the King of Great Britain.
I should like to know, sir, for what crime I'm condemned.
Your demand is a reasonable one. For with us, no one is condemned without knowing the cause of his condemnation. You must know, then, that the accusation charges you with intending to do grievous bodily harm to the person of a pretty girl. And as this pretty girl aforesaid goes in dread of you, the law decrees that you must be kept in prison for the rest of your days.
This accusation is a groundless calumny. To that I will take my oath. It is very possible indeed the young girl may fear my vengeance when she comes to consider her own conduct, but I can assure you I have had no such designs hitherto, and I don't think I ever shall.
She has 2 witnesses.
Then they are false ones. May I ask your worship the name of my accuser?
Miss Chapillon.
I thought as much. Sir, I have never given her aught but proofs of my affection.
Then you have no wish to do her bodily harm?
Certainly not.
Well, then I congratulate you. You can dine at home. But you must find 2 sureties. I must have an assurance from the mouths of 2 householders that you will never commit such a crime.
Who shall I find to do so?
2 well-known Englishmen, whose friendship you have gained, and who know you are incapable of such an action. Send for them, and if they arrive before I go to dinner, I will set you at liberty.
Grazie, signore.
The constable took me back to prison where I passed the night. And I gave my servants the addresses of all the household I recollected, bidding them explain my situation, and to be as quick as possible. They ought to have come before noon, but London is such a large place. They did not arrive, and the magistrate went to dinner. I comforted myself with the thought that he would sit in the afternoon, but I had to put up with a very disagreeable experience.
The chief constable, accompanied by an interpreter, came to say that he must go to Newgate. This was a prison where the most wretched and abject criminals were kept. Casanova signified to him that he was awaiting bail, and that he could be taken to Newgate in the evening if it did not come. But he only turned a deaf ear to the petition. The interpreter told him in a whisper that the fellow was certainly paid by the other side to put him into trouble, but if he liked to bribe him, he could stay where he was.
How much will he want? The interpreter took the constable aside and told me that I could stay where I was for 10 guineas. Then say I should like to see Newgate. Newgate? Newgate. A coach was summoned and I was taken away. When I got to this abode of misery and despair, a hell such as Dante might have conceived, a crowd of wretches, some of whom were to be hanged within the week, greeted me by deriding my elegant attire. I did not answer them, and they began to get angry. The jailer quietened them, saying I was a foreigner and did not understand English. And then he took me to a cell, informing me how much it would cost me and of the prison rules, as if he felt certain that I would be there for a very, very long stay.
But in the course of half an hour, the constable who had tried to obtain 10 guineas out of him told him that bail had arrived and his carriage was at the door.
Signor Casanova, please to sign your name for double the amount, and you will then be a free man again.
At last, after one of the most tedious days I have ever spent, I returned home and I went to bed laughing at the experience I'd undergone. A lucky escape. Indeed. A few days afterwards, as I was walking and idling about, I passed a place called Parrot Market. Parrot Market? Parrot Market. And as I was amusing myself by looking at these curious birds, I saw a fine young one in a cage. And I asked what language it spoke. Italian, French, whatever. And they told me it was quite young and did not speak at all yet. So I bought it for 10 guineas. I thought I would teach the bird a pretty speech, so I had the cage hung by my bed and repeated dozens of times every day the following sentence. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother. Champignon is a bigger whore than her mother.
Casanova quickly recovered from these torrid events. The time eventually came for Casanova to leave London and head back across Europe. He swore that he would never greet England's shores again. Casanova sailed back across the Channel exhausted. He spent 2 weeks in bed and was bled by a doctor. Senator Bragadin sent him funds totalling to thousands onto Antwerp. Stopping off at Tournai, Casanova bumped into an old acquaintance of Madame de Uffay.
Oh, yes.
His name was Saint-Germain.
He had a score of retorts before him full of liquids in various stages of digestion. He told me he was experimenting with colours for his own amusement. Then we spoke of Madame d'Urf.
She poisoned herself by taking too strong a dose of the universal medicine. And her will shows that she thought herself to be with child. If she'd come to me, I could have made her really so. It's a very easy process, but one cannot be sure if the fruit be masculine or feminine.
Then he showed me his magistrum, which he called étude. It was a white liquid contained in a well-stoppered phial. He told me that this liquid was the universal spirit of nature, and that if the wax on the stopper was pricked ever so lightly, the whole of the contents would disappear. I begged him to make the experiment. He gave me the phial and a pin, and I pricked the wax, and lo, the phial was empty.
It's very fine, but what good is all this?
Well, I cannot tell you. It's my secret.
This was in his usual style of arrogance to which I was accustomed. This was the last time I saw this celebrated and learned impostor. He died at Schleswig 6 or 7 years after.
My apologies. Good sir.
Casanova headed onwards towards Germany and stopped at Wolfenbüttel at the Herzog August Bibliothek, at the time one of the finest libraries in Europe. It was there he came across Alexander Pope's translation of Homer. Casanova began translating the Iliad. He translated it into Italian. This was his first major literary adventure. Bruised by his recent encounters, he withdrew into himself and became into a more contemplative state of mind. But it wasn't long before the feeling of adventure bubbled up inside him, and he longed for a bigger playground and a new city to explore. As he turned 40, a new chapter of his life began.
Casanova, in search of a new job, also came to Berlin, and as he used to do, he tried to start high up and really was able to have an interview with Frederick II, Frederick the Great, who was a cultural king. He was playing flute, he was writing poetry, he liked the French language and culture very much. He had invited Voltaire at his court. On the other hand, he was very cross with the French politics. This was a time that Madame Pompadour was really directing the policy of France in the rest of the world. And he didn't like her at all in that position. And he gave proof of that by naming his little dog Pompadour. So every time he loved to say, "Come here, Pompadour." Casanova aimed at getting a job in the army of Frederick. And King Frederick had a real regiment of nice, tall people, hoping to impress the world with that. So Casanova was hoping to get a position in teaching these cadets something of life in the world. but he didn't get the position.
Casanova took a carriage and hired 6 horses to embark on his journey to Russia, but like Napoleon, he crossed Europe in the bitterly cold winter. Snowbound and icy, he crossed Poland and western Russia to arrive in Moscow and finally to the gates of the city of St. Petersburg.
We know, in the meanwhile, who did get the position, and it was the one who has written Baron von Münchhausen, with the book of traveling through the world by grabbing a cannonball and let yourself be shot. So Casanova missed to be Baron of Münchhausen himself.
Casanova arrived in Warsaw on the 10th of October 1765. He at once found his way to the court of King Stanislaus Augustus, King of Poland. He fascinated the king with stories of his adventures and the Kabbalah. It was perhaps Casanova's final attempt to get inside royal purses, for which he had a certain skill.
I must tell you of an event which took place toward the end of January. It was in fact a dream. As I think I've confessed to you before, superstition has always had some hold on me.
Yes.
Well, I dreamt I was at a banquet, and one of the guests threw a bottle at my face. The blood poured forth, and I ran my sword through the enemy, and jumped into a carriage and rode away. The very next night, Prince Charles of Courland came to Warsaw and asked me to dine with him at Prince Paninsky's, the same that was so notorious and was afterwards proscribed and shamefully dishonored.
Yes.
His was a hospitable house, and he was surrounded by an agreeable family. I'd never called on him before because he was a persona non grata to the king and his relations. But in the course of the dinner, a bottle of champagne burst, and a piece of broken glass struck me just below the eye. It could have veined, the blood gushed forth, over my face, over the clothes, even over the cloth.
Good heavens.
Everybody rose, my wound was bound up, the cloth was changed, and the dinner went on merrily. But I was struck between the similarity of that and my dream. Although I was happy about the differences, I didn't have to kill anybody, but all those events came to pass just 1 month later.
Casanova attended the theatre with the king. He was fascinated by a dancer named Madame Casacci. He went backstage to speak to her, kissing her on the cheek. Unfortunately, though, she already had a lover.
Casanova was famous for 2 things. He fled from the leads in Venice and for his duel in Warsaw with Count Branitzky. Branitzky was Francis Xavier Korczak, and he had 1 year before Casanova met him become Count Branitzky. He was ambassador of Poland to Berlin. He was in the army. He was a high-ranking man of very recent nobility, but he was a real count. And the point that made Casanova so famous was not so much that he won or lost a duel, but that he, as someone who was not of nobility, was in a real duel with someone from nobility. This crossed the border, and that was important. Casanova used to say of himself, "I'm nothing, I'm a zero. I have no nobility, but that's why I'm free."
Well, absolutely divine.
Thank you.
Just as I embraced her, who should enter but Branitzky, whom I had left a moment before with Madame Binetti. He had clearly followed me in the hopes of picking a quarrel.
Seems to me I've come at a bad time. Looks as if you love this lady.
Certainly, my lord. Thinks not your excellency her as worthy of love?
Oh, quite so. As it happens, I love her too. And I'm not the man to bear any rivals.
As I know that, I shall love her no more.
Then you give her up?
With all my heart. For everyone must yield to one as noble as you are.
Very good. I call a man that yields a coward.
Isn't that a rather strong expression?
You Venetian coward.
Perhaps a Venetian coward might kill a brave Pole outside the theatre.
Without awaiting a reply, I left the building by the chief staircase. I waited vainly outside the theatre for a quarter of an hour with my sword in my hand. At last, half perishing with cold, I called my carriage and drove to the Palatines, where the king was to sup.
Don't worry, I've not come to assassinate you, merely to say I accept your proposal, on condition only that the duel must take place today. If not today, never.
That is out of the question. I have letters to write and I've business to do for the king.
That will do afterwards. In all probability, you won't fall, and if you do, I'm sure the king will forgive you. Besides, a dead man need fear no reproaches.
I want to make my will.
Come, come. You needn't be afraid of dying. There'll be time enough to write your will in 50 years.
But why should your excellency not wait until tomorrow?
Because I don't want to be caught.
You have nothing of the kind to fear from me.
I dare say. But if we don't make haste, the king will have us both arrested.
How can he? Unless you have told him of our quarrel.
You don't understand. Look, I'm quite willing to give you satisfaction, but it must be today or never.
Very well. This duel is too dear to my heart for me to allow you any pretext for avoiding it. Does Your Excellency intend on spending the spring in Warsaw?
I had thought of doing so, but you may possibly send me to pass the spring somewhere else.
Oh, I hope not.
Have you seen any military service?
Yes. Why do you ask?
No particular reason. It was only for the sake of saying something.
We had driven about half an hour when the carriage stopped at the door of a large garden. We got down and, following the postoli, reached a green arbor. In it was a stone table on which the footman placed 2 pistols, 1.5 feet long, with a powder flask and scales. He weighed the powder, loaded them equally, and laid them down crosswise on the table.
Choose your weapon, sir.
Is this a duel, sir?
Yes.
You cannot fight here, sir. You are within the ban.
No matter.
It does matter. And I, at all events, refuse to be a witness. I'm on guard at the castle. You have taken me by surprise.
Be quiet. I will answer for everything. I owe this gentleman satisfaction, and I mean to give it him here.
Mr. Casanova, you may not fight here.
Then why have I been brought here? I will defend myself wherever I'm attacked.
Put the matter before the king, and you shall have my voice in your favor.
I'm quite willing to do so, General. If His Excellency will say he regrets what passed between us last night.
I came to fight, not parley.
General, you can bear witness that I have done everything in my power to avoid this duel.
I swear upon my honor your weapon is a good one.
Then I will try its goodness on your head. Fire, sir.
I was not in a position to let him kill me at his ease, so I suddenly aimed and fired on him, just as he fired on me.
Scoundrels! Have some respect for a man of honor. You have killed me, so make haste away, as you are in danger of the gibbet. The duel was fought within the ban, and I am a High Court officer and a Knight of the White Eagle, so lose no time. And if you have not enough money, take
fine.
Thanks, it will be useless to me. If I'm guilty, I'm content to lose my head. I hope your wound will not be mortal. I'm deeply grieved that your having obliged me to fight.
The ball had pierced my hand by the metacarpus under the index finger and had broken the first phalanges. Its force had been arrested by a metal button on my waistcoat, and it had only inflicted a slight wound on my stomach, close to the navel.
Casanova left England and travelled across Eastern Europe, having escaped imprisonment at Newgate and the duplicitous scheming of the Sharpion.
I have come to breakfast with you, and to discuss a certain question.
Don't mind my laughing. My niece is an innocent, giddy girl.
So show me a little more of your charms.
More of my charms?
Your demand is a reasonable one.
You will get nothing from me.
Superstition has always had some hold on me.
Snowbound and icy, he crossed Poland and western Russia.
Seems to me I've come at a bad time. Looks as if you love this lady.
Casanova used to say of himself, I'm nothing, I'm a zero. I have no nobility, but that's why I'm free.
But having narrowly avoided death in the duel, Casanova was no longer safe and once again had to move on.
I could kill myself this instant.
I should blame him for doing so.
She is too good by far for a poor wretch like me.
He ought to escape by all means, if only to save his life for my sake.
The stupid fellow has played me shall cost him dear.
What you show me there is monstrous.
She was naturally of a passionate disposition.